What's going on, everyone? I'm back with part 2 of the year in wrestling 1987 coming at you right now. I ended part 1 of the year in wrestling 1987 talking about the Great American Bash 87. It was released on home video. It was not a pay-per-view, and I have the DVD. I own the DVD. Anyways, the main event to the Great American Bash 87, July 4th, Atlanta, Georgia, was the War Games match. You had Dusty Rhodes, Road Warriors, Paul Ellering versus J.J. Dillon, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Ric Flair, the Four Horsemen. Woo! And the Nature Boy bled in the War Games. A lot of guys bled in it. The teams, I believe, were 4 on 4. I think maybe Lex Luger, I think, was in it, and Nikita Koloff was in it too. So it was 5 on 5. I apologize. Pretty sure it was 5 on 5. Just about every guy in the match bladed themselves. That made sense because it was a cage match, it was a violent match, it was the War Games. 1987, the very first War Games in NWA/WCW history. And it was a hell of a main event, hell of a War Games match. 2 rings with a cage. We've never seen anything like that before or since. Last War Games match was 1998, and it was at Fall Brawl, WCW 98 Fall Brawl pay-per-view. And also what happened at the Great American Bash 87, Jim Ross, good old JR, came in to the NWA. He was hired by the Jim Crockett. I believe they purchased the UWF. UWF was a promotion that Jim Ross was in. I believe it was run by Bill Watts. He sold it to Jim Crockett. UWF had guys like Dr. Dusty Williams, Rick Steiner, Sting, Eddie Gilbert, Dingo Warrior was there. He worked there with Sting for a short time when they were the Blade Runners. And everybody knows Dingo Warrior, or whatever his name was when he was in the Blade Warriors, or Blade Runners. No, Blade Runners. When Warrior was in the Blade Runners with Sting, I don't even remember his name. I don't know if he was Dingo Warrior in UWF. But anyways, the Dingo Warrior was Ultimate Warrior. And later on, in the fall of 87, the Ultimate Warrior came into the WWF. He was hired for a tryout. They loved his tryout, and they hired him. And he had a hell of a look. Warrior was never great. He never had great matches. Not with many, at least. The only good matches Warrior really had were with Rick Rude and with Randy Savage. And Warrior had a very good match with Hulk Hogan also at WrestleMania 6. Anyways, Jim Ross came in the NWA at the Great American Bash 87. Was JR's first show doing play-by-play, and it was at the Bash 87, is when JR debuted with the NWA and Jim Crockett. July 4th, 87, Jim Ross came into the NWA. Another big thing that happened in 87 was May, I believe. May 26th, 87. Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik were arrested. They were pulled over in New Jersey. They were arrested. Duggan was charged with possession of weed, possession of marijuana. Iron Sheik and Duggan was charged with drinking alcohol while driving. Iron Sheik was charged with possession of cocaine and marijuana. Duggan's charges were dismissed later on. Iron Sheik received 1 year probation, and that happened May 26, 1987. And after this happened, WWF kept Duggan off TV, kept Hacksaw off TV for a long time. I don't remember when he came back. I know he worked Survivor Series 87 in November on Thanksgiving, but I don't know how long he was kept off TV since May 26th, when he was arrested with the Iron Sheik and pulled over in New Jersey. And Iron Sheik, I believe, was fired. WWF fired Iron Sheik, and he was no longer around in the WWF in 87 or 88. Iron Sheik actually returned in 1991 for a short time. Maybe for, I don't know, a couple months. Iron Sheik, maybe 6 months, was back in 1991 in the WWF. I believe he's Colonel Mustafa. Okay, now we'll talk about some of the attendance in 1987 for the 3 big shows. For WWF WrestleMania 3, as we know, it was a record-breaking attendance record. 93,173 people attended WrestleMania 3. That's a hell of a mark. That is very, very impressive. But WWF was blowing up in 87, and that's not a shocker that 93,000 people came to see Hogan versus Andre. Epic matchup. All-time great WrestleMania moment for sure. Other shows: Survivor Series 87, the first Survivor Series, held in Richfield, Ohio. Had 21,300 people were in attendance. That's a big crowd. 21,000 for the first Survivor Series. I'm sure they drew a lot of money, and I'm sure the house was a huge payday for WWF, drawing 21,300 for Survivor Series 87. Starrcade 87, held on the same day. If anybody out there doesn't know that, Starrcade 87 and Survivor Series 87 were held on the same day on Thanksgiving 1987. Anyways, Starrcade attendance in Chicago, Illinois was 8,000 people. That's not very good, but it's decent. Not a bad crowd. 8,000 people for the NWA, for a Starrcade. That's not bad at all, because this was Chicago, the Midwest, and the NWA and all those Starrcades before basically were held in the South. and they drew much bigger crowds in the South, like 20,000, 22,000, 23,000 people. I'm sure they drew all the other years because the NWA basically ran in the South until '87 when they decided to go to Chicago for the first pay-per-view, I believe, outside of the South. Anyways, NWA went to Chicago and they drew 8,000 people for Starrcade '87. Decent crowd, but not as good as WWF. But in my opinion, in '87, WWF was the better promotion, the better company. They drew more people to their shows. They drew sellouts non-stop. And I'm not saying that it's bad that the NWA didn't draw sellouts at every arena and every show. And it's not a bad thing that they were the #2 company because their wrestling in the NWA, the wrestling in '87 and '88 and '89 was fucking awesome. I love the style of wrestling in the NWA in '87, '88, '89 was great. The style was great. The wrestling was probably better. The wrestling matches were probably better in the NWA. But WWF outdrew them all the time. They had the Saturday Night's main events on free TV. And a little fact about Survivor Series '87 and about Starrcade '87. They were held on the same day, but Vince and the WWF threatened, or allegedly threatened, the NWA and threatened, not the NWA, WWF and Vince threatened a lot of cable companies and told them if you put on Starrcade '87 up against Survivor Series '87, if you put them up against, if you show Starrcade over Survivor Series, basically Vince threatened the cable companies. I'm sure he did. I don't know for a fact, but it was documented in the Starrcade Essentials DVD during the Starrcade DVD story, the documentary about Starrcade. Somebody from the NWA, I believe is David Crockett, Jim Crockett's brother, David Crockett, who was announcer for the NWA. He said that basically WWF and Vince McMahon told the cable companies, if you put on Starrcade, you won't get WrestleMania next year. You will not get to carry WrestleMania 4 on your cable systems if you show Starrcade. So the cable companies picked Survivor Series '87, basically. So Starrcade '87 did not have a good buy rate, and it was not seen live by many people, I'm sure. And I'm sure Survivor Series '87 did a really good buy rate and had a lot of people order it, because you had Hogan, Team Andre versus Team Hogan was the main event, and people wanted to see Hogan and Andre in the ring again, go at it. So Survivor Series was a huge success, I'm sure, on pay-per-view, and it was a huge success in the arena. 21,000 people saw Survivor Series and sold out the arena, and only 8,000 showed up for Starrcade '87. But that doesn't mean the NWA sucked because only 8,000 showed up. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying Survivor Series and WWF outdrew the NWA in the late '80s. They were the bigger company. They had the better production. They had the better lighting, for sure. They had the the better storylines. The couple storylines they did in the late 80s with Jake the Snake versus Rick Rude feud. That was great stuff. Hogan versus Macho Man, WrestleMania 5. The build up to their feud, that was great stuff. Great storyline there with Miss Elizabeth and Hogan basically carrying Miss Elizabeth out of a main event when Randy Savage fell out of the ring, got thrown out of the ring, knocked Miss Elizabeth over. Anyways, that was 1989. I'm talking about 1987. Now I'm going to talk about Starrcade 87 from Chicago. Happened on Thanksgiving. Was the 5th Starrcade that the NWA put on. And this one was on pay-per-view, but it wasn't seen by many because all the cable companies basically carry sit down and get a drink. Okay, Starrcade 87. Gonna read the matches here for you. Eddie Gilbert. First match was hot stuff. Eddie Gilbert, Rick Steiner, and Larry Zbyszko taking on Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, Sting, and Michael P.S. Hayes. Six-man tag team action. A lot of these guys, Eddie Gilbert, Sting, Rick Steiner, they were from the UWF, and the NWA brought them in and hired them basically because UWF was bought by Jim Crockett, I believe. Eddie Gilbert, Rick Steiner, and Larry Zbyszko defeated Sting, Michael Hayes, and Jimmy Garvin. I do remember the match a little bit. I know Sting did a dive over the top rope and got the crowd really fired up. Got the crowd to pop. They loved Sting and they loved his look. And this was 1987 was Sting's first Starrcade event, and he was at probably after 87 he was on every other Starrcade there ever was. I don't know if he was on 2000 Starrcade, I don't remember, because 2000 Starrcade sucked. But Sting, his first Starrcade, and a star was born in Sting, the Stinger. Up next you had UWF champion Dr. Dusty Williams pinned and beat Barry Windham. You had the Rock and Roll Express defeat the Midnight Express in a scaffold match. 1986 1986 the Midnight Express took on the Road Warriors in a scaffold match. It was pretty awesome. A year later, we have another scaffold match. And it was Rock and Roll versus the Midnight Express. One of the greatest tag team feuds of all time. They had epic matches in Mid-South Wrestling in the 80s before the Midnight and the Rock and Roll then went to the NWA and worked for Jim Crockett. And before or after Mid-South Wrestling in their epic tag team matches, they were in I believe Rock and Roll Express or Midnight Express. One of them worked for WCCW in '87 for a short time, or '86. Scaffold match. It was entertaining. As I said, Rock and Roll went over. You had NWA TV champ Nikita Koloff defeat UWF TV champ Terry Taylor in a unified titles match. The winner got both titles. So Nikita Koloff became and unified the championships. He became the UWF TV champ. And after that, no UWF titles were ever seen or defended again in the NWA. Because all the UWF talent that came into the NWA, basically their titles from the UWF meant nothing. That's why this was a unified the titles match. Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, the NWA World Tag Team Champs, beat the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal. It was a crazy finish. Either Arn or Tully were thrown over the top. And then a different ref, I believe, counted the 3. And the Road Warriors were declared the World Tag Team Champs until the original official called it off and said no, because they were thrown over the top rope. And if you were thrown over the top rope in the 80s in the NWA, it was a disqualification. I never understood that as a kid, as a teenager, and still as an adult. I did not understand, if you get thrown over the top rope, you're disqualified. That is just weird and odd to me. I never got that rule. So you can't throw someone over the top rope or else you're disqualified. That is really stupid, I think. But Arn and Tully retained. And after they retained at Starrcade, they didn't stay for much longer in the NWA. They left in '88 to go to work for WWF as the Brainbusters. But I'll talk about them in 1988 in my next video on 1988. Then you had Dusty Rhodes, the U.S. Heavyweight Champion, defeat Lex Luger in a steel cage for the U.S. title. Dusty pulled out a good match in Lex, and he retained. Nature Boy Ric Flair defeated Ronnie Garvin, the man with the hands of stone, rugged Ronnie Garvin. I don't know if he was rugged Ronnie in NWA, but he was rugged Ronnie when he went to the WWF in '89. Anyways, Ric Flair won the title back, the NWA World title, in a steel cage. It was a hell of a match. I really enjoyed Flair versus Garvin. It was a hard-hitting, physical match in a cage. Flair bled. Ronnie Garvin beat the hell out of Ric Flair, chopped his chest as hard as he could, and it was a hard-hitting, very good NWA World Title Steel Cage match. That was the main event of Starrcade '87. Ric Flair won the title back because Ronnie Garvin beat Flair for the NWA title in Detroit at a house show He beat him in September and he won it back. Flair lost it in September 87, won it back on Thanksgiving in November 87. So Ronnie had a short championship reign. Okay, I'm going to talk about some of the champions in wrestling from the NWA and WWF that started the year off as champions, and I'm going to tell you who ended the year as champions. You had Lex Luger, started 1987 off as U.S. Heavyweight Champion, lost it to the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, at Starrcade. 87, I believe. Nature Boy Ric Flair, as I just discussed a minute ago. Flair lost the NWA World Title in Detroit at a house show. There were cameras there. There's footage of that match, and I believe Ron Garvin won the world title with a sunset flip off the top rope in a cage at a house show in Detroit. Ron Garvin won the world title from Ric Flair September 25th, 1987. And then Ron Garvin lost the world title back to the Nature Boy at Starrcade in November 87. Hulk Hogan, I'll keep it on NWA titles for now. The NWA World Tag Team Champions started the year off. They were the Rock and Roll Express. And then Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez won the tag team titles. And Rick Rude was not in the NWA long in 1987, because in May 87 Rick Rude was hired by the WWF, so he left the NWA. So Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude were no longer the tag champs. Somehow, I guess they gave them up, and maybe a tournament went on, because then Tully and Arn Anderson won the tag team titles. Tully and Arn Anderson, the Four Horsemen, won the tag team titles they must have won a tournament or something. Arn and Tully were tag champs. And then on September 29th, 1987, the Rock and Roll Express won the tag team titles back, basically, and they held them until the end of 87. Until past 1987. Rock and Roll ended the year as tag champs, and they started the year as tag champs in the NWA. And I'm not gonna discuss who was NWA TV champ. I know Nikita Koloff was the champ. I don't know for how long. I don't feel like looking that up. WWF, Hulk Hogan, the immortal Hulk Hogan. See here, Hulkamania shirt. Big fan of Hulk Hogan. He's the 100% reason why I became a wrestling fan, is because of Hulk Hogan. Seeing him in late 86, 87, when I saw Hogan, I got hooked on wrestling, and I've been hooked ever since. It's like a freaking drug. I don't know what it is, but if you're hooked and you're a fan for life, you don't stop watching professional wrestling or the WWE. Even though the WWE calls themselves entertainment, and they're basically an entertainment show. They're still in a wrestling ring, so it's still wrestling. Hulk Hogan started '87 as WWF World Heavyweight Champion, and he ended '87 still as WWF World Champ. He won the title in January 1984, and in February '88, Hogan had to give up the WWF World Heavyweight title because it was vacated after Andre the Giant won it in a controversial match with two referees, twin referees anyways. That was in 1988, and I'll talk about '88 in my next video. Hogan was champ the entire year of '87. Very impressive, and it was well deserved. Hogan was the only guy basically that could hold that torch and run with it for the entire year of '87. And '86 and '85 and '84, Hogan was the man. Those 3 years also. And '87 was basically his 4th year holding the WWF Championship. But February '88, when Hogan gave it up because he lost to Andre, then it was over 4 years basically. Hogan was WWF Champion. Intercontinental Champion Randy Savage started 1987 off as Intercontinental Champ. As everybody knows, he lost to Ricky Steamboat at WrestleMania 3. Ricky Steamboat became Intercontinental Champion. And then, June 2nd, 1987, the Honky Tonk Man won it. I believe it was on a Superstars of Wrestling, and I know it was on a Coliseum home video. It was on one of the best of the WWF tapes that I have. It was on one of those tapes. Honky Tonk Man became IC champ June 2nd, 1987. Ricky Steamboat had a very short reign as Intercontinental Champ. That sucked, but he had a short reign because he asked for time off to be with his family because his wife was giving birth to their first son, Richie Steamboat. So Ricky wanted time off, and WWF gave him time off, but they told him the Intercontinental Championship could not be off TV for months and months because back then in '87, '88, '89, even '86, the Intercontinental Championship meant something. It meant a lot. So Ricky Steamboat had to do the job to Honky Tonk Man. So Ricky only held the IC title for about 3 months. He should have had a longer reign, but he took time off to see the birth of his son, and that's cool. I respect that. Anyways, so Savage started the year as Intercontinental Champ, then Ricky Steamboat, and then in June 2nd, '87, Honky Tonk Man, the Elvis impersonator. But I always enjoyed the Honky Tonk Man gimmick. It's a great gimmick. I always enjoyed it. And then, of course, after winning it June '87, Honky Tonk Man did not lose it for well over a year. And he had one of the longest, I think, in history. It is the longest Intercontinental title run of anybody. He held it for well over 12 months until August '88. Honky Tonk Man was a great champion, and as he started calling himself and saying in interviews all the time, he was the greatest Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion of all time. And I agree, he is one of the greatest Intercontinental champs of all time because how long he held it. And he had a hell of a gimmick. Great gimmick. And he played that part perfectly. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about for 1987 that happened was WWF Survivor Series pay-per-view. First match that kicked off Survivor Series, you had the team of Hacksaw Jim Duggan. He was back after he got arrested in May. He was back on this pay-per-view. His first WWF pay-per-view where he was wrestling was Survivor Series. Hacksaw debuted at WrestleMania 3, but Survivor Series 87 was the first show where he was in the ring having a match. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Randy Macho Man Savage, Ricky Steamboat, Brutus Beefcake, and Jake the Snake Roberts. That was their team. 5-man team took on Harley Race, Hercules, the Honky Tonk Man, Danny Davis, and Ron Bass. That match went over 24 minutes. It was a lot of stars in this first match at Survivor Series. A lot of Hall of Famers in this match. Jake the Snake, Randy Savage, Jim Duggan, Ricky Steamboat. All 4 of those guys are Hall of Famers, and they damn sure deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Well deserved for those 4 guys. Brutus Beefcake is not in the Hall of Fame, and I don't know if he'll ever get in. Harley Race, Hall of Famer. Harley Race is the only Hall of Famer on that 5-man team. Honky Tonk Man should really be in the Hall of Fame, and it's a damn shame he's not. Anyways, Macho Man's team defeated the team of Harley Race, Honky Tonk Man, Ron Bass, Hercules, and Danny Davis. They defeated them. The next Survivor Series elimination match was a match of 2 teams of women. I believe is 4-on-4. All women, with Velvet McIntyre teaming with the Jumping Bomb Angels and Rockin' Robin and the Fabulous Moolah. So that's 5 women. So it was 5-on-5. All women's Survivor Series elimination match. Rockin' Robin, Fabulous Moolah, Jumping Bomb Angels, and Velvet McIntyre took on and beat Lalani Kai, Judy Martin, Dawn Marie, Donna Cast, Christina Nella, or whatever her name is, and Sherry Martel. That match went 20 minutes. It was a decent women's Survivor Series elimination match. It was decent. Next Survivor Series elimination match, I believe, had 10-on-10, 10 tag teams on each side. I think there's a lot of guys in this elimination match, a lot of freaking guys, and they're all part of a tag team. Tag teams were huge in the 80s. In 87, WWF had a lot of tag teams, a lot of good tag teams, a lot of guys that could work, and a lot of guys that were great. Anyways, Killer Bees were on one side with Jim Powers and Paul Roma, the Young Stallions, along with Strike Force and the British Bulldogs and the Rougeau brothers. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams. So 5 tag teams versus 5 tag teams. That's 10 on 10. 10 guys versus 10 guys. 5 tag teams on each side. The heel teams against them were Greg Valentine and Dino Bravo, the Dream Team. You had the Demolition, Axe and Smash. You had the Hart Foundation. You had the Islanders and the Bolsheviks. This 10 on 10, 5 on 5 tag teams. This match went on a long time, almost 40 minutes, 37 minutes. It went on and it was entertaining, but 37 minutes is pretty damn long. Freaking cat wants to get in. Come here. Say hi, Benny. There's Benny. There's Benny. Everybody, that's Benny, my cat. It's a rescue cat I got from a shelter almost 3 years ago. Okay, I'm done. Freaking cat is nuts. Hold on a minute. Goodness. I want to sit in the window. Main event. Anyways, the 5 babyface teams defeated the 5 heel teams. In that match, 37 minutes, that's a long, long tag team elimination match to sit through and watch. But I've done it, and I've watched that match at least 5 times since I have owned Survivor Series 87 on DVD for years and years. Main event, last match on the show, Survivor Series 87. Andre the Giant's team with Bobby Heenan, and I believe Slick was there also, because he managed the one-man gang. Andre the Giant's team was massive, huge, super heavyweight giants in the WWF at the time. His team was full of giants, just super big guys. They were just huge and awesome to look at. Andre the Giant, team captain. His team was a one-man gang. King Kong Bundy, Rick Rude, and Butch Reed. So, I mean, Rick Rude and Butch Reed aren't giants, but they're big guys. They have great bodies. They're muscular. So, they're really strong guys. I wouldn't call them giants, but Rick Rude and Butch Reed were really strong, and they had great talent in the ring, and they could work with anybody and have a great match with just about anybody. Okay, Andre's team versus Hulk Hogan, team captain Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was WWF champ at the time. He was the team captain. Makes sense. Andre was the team captain on the other team. Hogan and Andre earlier, WrestleMania 3, they went at it in the main event in Survivor Series 87. It was kind of like a WrestleMania 3 Hogan and Andre rematch, but it was part of an elimination match. Hogan's team was Hulk Hogan, Bam Bam Bigelow, Paul Orndorff, Don Morocco, and Ken Patera. They defeated No, they did not defeat. Andre the Giant's team defeated Hogan's team. Hogan, I believe, was counted out by the ref. He was counted out when he body slammed King Kong Bundy on the floor. So Hogan did not survive in the Survivor Series. Andre survived when he pinned Bam Bam Bigelow to get the victory. The match went 22 minutes. The main event went at Survivor Series. Andre won, got his hand raised by Bobby the Brain Heenan, one of the greatest managers of all time, and also one of the greatest on commentary also. Raised Andre's hand. Hogan came down, ran to the ring, basically started punching and beating the crap out of Andre, punching and chopping him. And I believe Andre, then he bailed out of the ring, got out of the ring, left. He was angry, he was pissed off. Then Hogan was standing in the ring alone. Hulkamania, Real American hit, and he posed and he did his thing in the ring. And he posed and he got, basically, the crowd popped and they loved it when Hogan posed in the ring. Hogan has ton of charisma. Great. Hogan is just great. The fans love the guy, and he was the face in the franchise, and he carried the WWF in the 80s, no doubt about it. If it wasn't for Hogan, I don't even know there would be a WWE right now, to be honest. Without Hogan and Vince, there might not be any wrestling right now in 2015. Anyways, that was Survivor Series 87. Took place November 26th. It was a hell of a pay-per-view. You had a ton of Hall of Fame talent on Survivor Series 87. It was a great pay-per-view. WrestleMania 3 also was an epic pay-per-view. And for the NWA, Great American Bash was not a pay-per-view, but I own it on DVD, and I've watched it, trust me. Great American Bash was the first War Games match. It was an awesome show. Was the Bash 87. A lot of hard-hitting wrestling action from the NWA. They had a great product in 87, and great company in 87, and I believe in 88 they were bought by Ted Turner. But that has to do with 1988. 87, Starrcade was on pay-per-view. Also that show, and those matches were great. So the big three shows: WrestleMania 3, Starrcade 87 from the NWA, and WWF Survivor Series 87. All those shows were on pay-per-view, and they were all epic, great shows. Because back in 87, you didn't have freaking 15 pay-per-views a year. Whatever, how many ever they run. What if it's 12 or 15? Whatever it is, how many shows they run nowadays. I mean, just think about the month of May. They've already ran Extreme Rules, Payback, and coming up in 2 weeks is WWE Elimination Chamber. That's three three. Wait, no, I don't remember if Extreme Rules was in May or if it was in April. I don't effing know. Probably was late April. Anyways, WWE running 2 pay-per-views in 1 month and a third live show this month called NXT TakeOver Unstoppable. That's 3 main big shows in 1 month. That's way too many for even hardcore wrestling fans. 3 pay-per-view big shows. I mean, I'll watch them because it's only $9.99, so I'm gonna watch all 3 because I'm nuts and I tweet about every freaking pay-per-view. That's basically why I watch all the pay-per-views, so I can just tweet about them. And, well, I do still love the wrestling business with all my heart. But basically, that was 1987, the year in wrestling, part 2. Hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, well, I don't really care. If you did watch it, if you did watch this, it probably went over 40 minutes. I think it's gone over 40 minutes. I'm sure you didn't sit through the whole 40 minutes, but it takes time to talk about a whole year, you know. So, if you did watch some of it, thank you for watching. I appreciate it a lot. I appreciate all my followers on Twitter. And peace out. Have another video in a week or in a couple days or whenever I feel like it. Peace out. Bye for now, everybody.